Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Monday, September the 30th, 2024. And before I go any further tonight, I would like to take this opportunity to wish my son, Matthew, a happy 39th birthday. I love you, son. I appreciate you. You know, it's interesting. I was talking to him on the phone today and then a couple of days ago, and he said, Dad, you want to know what I want for a present? You don't have to mail anything. He said, you don't have to mail anything. I went, oh, good, because he lives in BC. I said, what do you want? He said, I want to come on your show and talk about stuff with you. Well, that's an interesting suggestion. So I've been thinking about it. He's a pretty smart guy, my son. So, yeah, I told him today that one of these days, very soon, because he's also up to date on all the stuff that we talk about. He knows about all the stuff we've talked about. One of these days soon, he will be coming on as part of a panel, mind you. I want to see how he does in a panel first before I bring him on one-on-one. And yeah, so you'll see him in a panel situation in the next couple of weeks here. Again, a good guy, a little bit of nepotism. I get it, but whatever. He's my son. I don't care. It's my show. I answer to nobody. I'm my own boss. I'll bring my son on the show, and you guys will probably enjoy it. So my boy Matthew will be joining the show. And once again, I love you, son. Happy birthday today. And I look forward to seeing Leo in the next couple of weeks for Thanksgiving. Hey, coming up on the show tonight, we're going to talk about cultural Marxism. You guys have probably heard me talk about this in the past. And some of you, and there's no reason to be embarrassed by not knowing exactly what it is, although I'm sure many of you do. We're going to talk about Marxism tonight. We're going to talk about cultural Marxism. We're going to talk about how it's been pervading our society for decades now. Decades, possibly even close to a century, considering the Russian Revolution happened in 1919 and apparently, or 1917, I'm sorry. And apparently the Winnipeg General Strike of 1919 was a part of that when the Bolsheviks tried to move communism worldwide and they came into Canada. That's what that uprising was about, according to many history scholars. So we're going to talk about cultural Marxism, the impact it's had, and what we can do about it. Don't forget to like and share, you guys. Get this out to as many people as we possibly can. If you're watching on Facebook tonight, like and share. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, smash that like button. Twitch, same thing. X, it's a reshare and a heart. What else? Rumble, don't forget to hit the share button beneath the screen. That highlights the URL above the screen. From there, you guys can share it to wherever you want to share it, wherever, groups, emails, whatever. Let's say some hellos. Helene. Helene? Hello, Helene. How you doing? Welcome to the show tonight. Lorraine is watching on Facebook. Karen's watching on YouTube. Leslie is watching in, I don't know where she's watching, but she's watching on Facebook. I know what you're watching on, Leslie. I just don't know where you're watching from. Hello, Bob, who is watching from Sudbury. Michelle is watching from Alameda, also not California, in the bustling constituency of Cannington, SK. You guys have got a provincial election coming up. I'm going to drop the writ tomorrow. We'll tell you more about that. In other words, what the polls are looking like there. Derek, hello, how you doing? Vern is watching from Northeast Saskatchewan tonight. Edna is watching from Victoria, which is the capital of British Columbia. You guys have an election coming up. We're going to start the show with some good news for you tonight from British Columbia as far as the polls are going. But first, the Shadow at Night live stream is, as always, brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
Comparing Crest toothpaste to SilverCeuticals toothpaste. First, we're starting out with Crest. It's a classic. It's an original. It's what I've used most of my life. But that being said, it does have its problems. First off, the consistency is so weird and thick, and I get it's a paste, but it really doesn't spread that well. And I must also say that I'm not in love with the taste. I get toothpaste isn't supposed to taste good, but why shouldn't it? But that being said, it does get the job done. Next, we have SilverCeuticals. They have 3 flavors, but today we're going with Bubbleberry. And already it smells so good. So I'm excited to see what this tastes like. The consistency is also a lot smoother, and I must say it spreads way nicer in your mouth.
This literally tastes like fruit bubblegum.
Yeah, this toothpaste was pretty good. I actually went in for seconds, and it's infused with nano silver, so it helps remineralize your teeth and keep them fresh throughout the day.
100% go with SilverCeuticals.
And here's the results. What's your favorite toothpaste?
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Engage your health now. Call Kevin and Anna at 204-808-9292 for all of the details about how you can order online, or you can find all of the, well, not all of, but many of the retail locations all across the country on the website. Just hit the retail locations tab, CanadaNanoSilver.com. All right. Before we begin our cultural Marxism journey tonight, let's go ahead and check out what's cooking in the Canadian provincial elections, which are coming up rather quickly. In Saskatchewan, again, they drop the writ tomorrow. In BC, the election is 2.5 weeks away, I believe. And here is the latest polling as per Main Street. This is just from a couple of days ago. Actually, this was updated today, they say here, September 30th, 2024, BC 2024 election. Look at these numbers here. The BC Conservatives have come from 0.2 a year ago to 44% support across the province, whereas the NDP has gone down 4.6 percentage points. They're sitting at 38% right now. Sorry, this is a seats thing. This is not a percentage thing. Basically, what you've got is gamblers' odds down here at the bottom. So the Conservatives have got a 60.1% chance of forming a majority government, whereas the NDP, it looks like they have only a 38% chance of forming a majority government. The Greens apparently will not get any seats. They'll be down 2. They've got 2 right now. So this is the way Main Street looks at it. Final seat counts of the 93. BC Conservatives wind up with 48 and the NDP wind up with 45. That gives the Conservatives a majority government by the skin of their teeth. Not bad from a party that was pretty much dead in the water and had been dead in the water for over 30 years until about a year ago. So congratulations to John Rustad. What am I saying? You don't congratulate somebody before they've actually won anything, ever. But it's looking good, at least that's what one polling agency says. It's looking decent for the BC Conservatives. From Canada 338Canada.com. Always get that backwards. The Saskatchewan election is coming up at the end of October. The writ drops tomorrow, and then the campaign begins, 27 days of it. It's going to be quick. And right now, it looks like the Saskatchewan Party, which is pretty much the right-leaning party in Saskatchewan, has got 51% of the vote as compared to the NDP. It's got 40%. So the seat projections looks like 39 for the Saskatchewan Party and 22 for the NDP, which keeps the Saskatchewan Party in power. I know there's a lot of people out there saying, no, Shadow, they got to vote Buffalo. They got to vote Buffalo. They got to vote Buffalo. If you guys want to split that right vote in Saskatchewan, you're going to wind up with an NDP government. That is a guarantee. So stop that nonsense right now. Until one of those other right-wing or right-leaning parties can get some kind of traction, province-wide in Saskatchewan, you're better off to use your vote for the Saskatchewan Party. You do not want an NDP government. Manitoba's got one, and they're going to drive this province back into the ground over the next 3 years. I know the PCs here were bad. They were very bad. But the NDP, they will be worse. Okay, so let's begin our journey on cultural Marxism tonight with this video from Pierre Poilievre. This was released about a year ago when Pierre was out campaigning, door knocking in Oshawa, Ontario, on behalf of Jalil Giovanni, who eventually did win the riding there with a huge majority of votes. But Pierre was out door knocking with Jalil Giovanni about a year ago, and he did not know that this was caught on tape, and the left-wing corporate media made some kind of protest story about this. Oh my God, it's time to stop calling Justin Trudeau a Marxist. Watch what Pierre says in this video.
A video of Pierre Poilievre going door knocking was posted to social media, and in it he can be heard calling the Trudeaus Marxists, a term used to describe a supporter of the political and economic theories of 19th century philosopher Karl Marx. This latest jab follows a contentious history between...
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to stop her there for one moment. That is a very, very simple explanation about Marxism. It's evolved considerably over the past 100 years, and we're going to get into that. But let's continue
both leaders. Jason Gaidola is live with us tonight with more on this. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Kelly, of course, a federal election is still 2 years away, but the Prime Minister and the opposition leader have come out swinging at each other many times like they're on the campaign trail. But in terms of this latest claim by Pierre Poilievre, some experts are throwing some cold water on that Marxist claim.
His dad started putting this country down, and he's gonna put it and fight and put the nail in the coffin.
Not if we can help it.
His dad started it a long time ago.
Well, they're both Marxists.
Well, going door to door in this video, a citizen appeared.
Well, they're both Marxists. So anybody who sits there saying, Pierre, hey, I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong. But the fact of the matter is that he is calling out Trudeau and his minions as Marxists in a video he didn't know was being recorded and didn't know was going to be released, which was used by the Marxists, thinking that they have, oh, look, he's calling us names now. It backfired on them big time is what I'm saying. But let's get back to this.
Well, they're both Marxists.
Well, going door to door in this video, a citizen appears to be criticizing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his father Pierre to opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, in which the Tory responds back by calling both men a Marxist. The viral video has sparked many comments online, including from Liberal MP Mark.
Homer Simpson says, say what you will about our political leaders, but to refer to any Canadian prime minister as a Marxist not only shows a massive misunderstanding of the term, no, it doesn't, but indeed is an insult to all those who have been subject to the political ideology. Now, I want to be absolutely clear here. Both Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, when Fidel Castro died, put out tweets that suggested that Fidel Castro was a revolutionary and a great man. He was a Marxist, totalitarian dictator who killed, the latest count, 11,000 of his own people. So, Mark, once again, you're wrong.
Garriston, who calls the claim a massive misunderstanding of the term and an insult.
But I certainly don't think that Justin Trudeau is a Marxist in a genuine, deep ideological sense. I think it was just used as a pejorative term.
Okay, this guy just thinks that Pierre's calling names here. He's wrong.
Designed to signal both his economic orientation, which has to do with distributing wealth from those who have more wealth to those who have less wealth, as well as his cultural orientation.
Today, some experts.
Okay, hold on just a second. Hold on just a second. This guy says, well, Poilievre just calling names and Marxist. And then he actually goes out and points out that Justin Trudeau's policies are Marxist. He doesn't say it, but he says what the policies are. And the policies are Marxist.
Signal both his economic orientation, which has to do with distributing wealth from those who have more wealth to those who have less.
Okay, so what is that? Distributing more wealth from the people who have wealth to the people that don't have wealth. That's Marxism.
Wealth, as well as his cultural orientation.
Today, some
cultural orientation. In other words, you're a denier if you don't believe what I'm telling you. And we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes.
Experts are pushing back on Poilievre's statement, who say Marxism, in its traditional sense, is criticism towards capitalism and the conflict between social classes. The term refers to the belief system of Karl Marx, a 19th century revolutionary socialist in Europe.
19th century critique of capitalism, its shortcomings, and he thought the workers should control the means of production, factories, etc. And a key addition to Marxism was Leninism. And with Marxism-Leninism came repression.
Professor of post-communist studies in Dayton, Ohio, Yaro Bielosarkovich, says the term is sometimes used to describe some actions among social democratic circles.
It's simply, they realize the realities are, if there aren't positive changes, then people will seek more radical changes. So positive reform, moderate reform can be successful, stabilize.
Despite a federal election being 2 years away, attacks and critiques between both Trudeau and Poilievre have become a common occurrence.
All right, that's enough of that. So you've got professors, political professors, talking about what Marxism really is, and Leninism, and all of that stuff. But they don't go into the details of it. They don't go into how it's evolved. They have apparently not a clue. We're going to get into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms tonight as well. But first, guys, this is Marxist NDP MP Leah Gazan in the House of Commons introducing a bill to criminalize anybody who denies residential schools. Right? Here she is.
Speaker, today I rise to table an act to amend the Criminal Code promotion of hatred against Indigenous peoples. If passed, this bill would add to the Criminal Code the offense of willfully promoting hatred against Indigenous peoples by condoning, denying, justifying, or downplaying the harm caused by the residential school system.
Okay, do you hear what she says there? Do you hear what she says there? It's hate if you deny or debate any of what they say.
If passed, this bill would add to the Criminal Code the offense of willfully promoting hatred against Indigenous peoples by condoning, denying, justifying, or downplaying the harm caused by the residential school system.
In other words, if you don't agree with their lies, then you can be charged. That's what she wants.
In Canada, calling irrefutable historical facts into question.
Yes, they are very refutable. They still haven't uncovered any graves in Kamloops, have they? And there are many Indigenous leaders in this country who've come out and said, yeah, you know, I had a wonderful experience at my residential school. But that doesn't get amplified in the left-wing corporate media like this does. And today is national holiday. It is National Truth and Reconciliation Day, when all these people are marching around in their orange t-shirts and they have no idea what it actually means. Let's continue on.
A genocidal project that was recognized as such unanimously in the House. Survivors and their families deserve to heal from this intergenerational tragedy and be free from violent hate, and we cannot allow their safety and well-being to be put further at risk. All parliamentarians must stand firm against all forms of damaging hate speech, including the denial of the tragedy of the residential schools in Canada. And at a time of increasing residential school denialism, including from some parliamentarians, survivors, their families, and communities need protection and a platform to share our history. In honor of Orange Shirt Day, I extend this gift to you on behalf of me and all of my colleagues. May you find justice and healing in the protection of your stories. Thank you very much.
She's a Marxist. Now, there are a great many similarities between BLM, Black Lives Matter in the United States, and this Every Child Matters movement up here in Canada. I'm not sure if they're being funded by the same people. But what she's calling for there in that motion is criminalizing free speech. That is what she is talking about. So we go to this lawyer website here, aclrc.com, some lawyer, some law firm in Ontario. And they're going to be giving us an explanation here on Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communications. So that would be social media, whatever, just the internet. Section 2B is a broadly protected right in Canada, they say. It protects any activity that conveys or attempts to convey a meaning. This covers a very wide scope, including, for example, speaking, writing, artwork, dancing, clothing choice, tattoos. It includes all forms of expression, so long as they do not include violence or threats of violence. Now, that's the sticking point here. The new Marxists, the neo-Marxists, believe that violence can be words. To me, the definition of violence is actually being violent physically. But these people, if you call somebody a name, to them, that is violence. I'm sure you've seen that on several different videos posted by Matt Walsh, Charlie Kirk, guys like that. The lawyers go on to say, we protect free expression for three major reasons. Free expression seeks to uphold the truth, encourages political and social participation, and promotes self-fulfillment. The test to see whether or not this kind of speech should be allowed. Three questions are asked to determine if your freedom of expression has been violated. Did your words or actions convey or attempt to convey a meaning or a message? Does the method or location of expression remove it from 2B protection? I don't believe that anything should be removed from 2B expression. I am a free speech absolutist, and I think we need to bring that to our country. Did the purpose or effect of the government action restrict your ability to convey that meaning? Well, obviously, they want to pass a law that is unconstitutional. The charter protection of free expression is very broad. Any activity is expressive if it attempts to convey meaning. As outlined above, this would include talking, singing, clothing choices, signs on somebody's property, artwork, gestures. Number two, does the method or location of expression remove it from 2B? Even if an activity has expressive content, 2B protection may be denied and the method or location of expression removes it from 2B scope, but they don't. Violence, I guess, threats of violence not protected by 2B. So that's the sticking point. What exactly is the definition, today's definition of violence, and who gets to define it? This is neo-Marxism. It's no longer control of the means of production. It's control of the means of communication and information. That's how it's evolved over the years. And if you speak out against what they're trying to do, you are somehow penalized, whether it's socially or criminally. Not all public places are protected by Section 2B. It protects locations where freedom of expression would be expected and which does not conflict with the purposes of Section 2B, democratic discourse, truth finding, and self-fulfillment. So that's kind of a loophole for them to jump through. To determine if free expression would be expected in a place, you have to consider two questions. Number one, is it historical or actual function of the place compatible with free expression? What does that even mean? Is the historical or actual function of the place compatible with free expression? Is it located in a free country like Canada? Then, yeah. Number two, are there any other aspects of the space which indicate that allowing freedom of expression would undermine the core values of freedom of expression under the Charter? Okay, do you guys get that? Are there any other aspects of the space, the physical space, where you are using your right of freedom of expression, which indicate that allowing free expression would undermine the core values of freedom of expression under the Charter? Number three, did the purpose or effect of the government action restrict your ability to convey that meaning? Government action will infringe 2B if it has the purpose or effect of restricting expression. Well, that's what that law is. That's what denialism. You cannot say, like, what is that anyway? Denialism. I say that certain aspects of their story, not all, but certain aspects of their story are absolute steaming piles of BS. Having said that, the 60s scoop, people being taken from their homes and families, and this goes back over 100 years, was absolutely abominable and is a blight on Canadian history. I don't deny that, not one bit. But what I do deny is the lying. If you want to come out and tell us a story, then you'd better damn well have evidence that this story is true. And if not, then sit down and shut up. But Leah Gazan, instead of sitting down and shutting up, wants to criminalize those who ask the very question that I just asked. Well, sometimes it's difficult to determine if a law's purpose seeks to control expression or if it's merely aimed at the physical consequences of the expression. If a law is purely aimed at the physical consequences of an activity, its purpose does not run afoul of Section 2B. This can be a confusing concept that's best explained by way of example. A law that prohibits distributing pamphlets restricts expression because it seeks to control a person's ability to communicate a message. On the other hand, a law that prohibits littering may adversely impact the distribution of pamphlets, but its purpose is aimed at consequences, not the expression itself. Okay, so now they want to talk about reasonable limits, hate speech, hate crimes, obscenities, and all of that stuff. It's very interesting that, you know, even obscenities, even hate speech should probably be protected under the freedom of expression, Section 2B of the Charter, unless it invokes violence. If somebody comes on social media and well, I'm not going to say it here because I might get arrested, but you know what I'm talking about, comes on here and says, go there and do this. Well, that's incitement to violence, which is a crime anyway. If somebody comes on here and starts spewing hate speech against a certain racial group or a certain person, well, that person is an idiot and also can probably be sued for defamation, but it shows you exactly who that person is and is probably not to be listened to. Why do they want to restrict speech from people who are showing you exactly who they are the second they open their mouths? They want to chill free speech because they want to control the means of information and communication. What is the problem?
They're pretty much in agreement that the Indian residential school system is one of our worst national crimes.
With this proposal that Leah Gazan made on Friday. This is a Toronto Sun columnist talking about that very
If you
thing.
look at poll numbers, near universal numbers of Canadians now believe it was a catastrophically bad idea to forcibly remove children from their homes and send them to abusive assimilationist boarding schools swarming with disease. But that hasn't stopped a top-level obsession with the issue of so-called residential school denialism. Kimberly Murray, the special interlocutor on unmarked graves at residential schools, even recommended that such talk be criminalized. One problem with this is that the term is used so broadly by academics and government that it's sometimes applied to things that are true. Earlier this year, a Vancouver area teacher was fired as a denialist for saying that most residential school deaths were due to disease, which was confirmed by no less than the Truth and Reconciliation final report. Or you could be written up as a denialist for citing the rare instances of students who had positive experiences at residential school, which was absolutely not the norm, but it did happen. Something else the Truth and Reconciliation report does mention.
Okay, you can't even say that was far from the norm. You can't say that. You cannot say that because you don't know. You haven't got the figures in front of you. All you've got are people yelling and screaming that they were abused at residential schools, but you do not hear the positive voices. So how could he ever make a statement like that? Well, I agree with him in principle. I don't agree with his summation at the end. It couldn't be true because he hasn't got the statistics to back it up. All right, let's get back to this here. Black Lives Matter. This is Patrice Coulor. She is one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, which was an organization that was funded publicly in the United States, but also by groups funded by George Soros. Listen to her talk in this interview about being a trained Marxist.
He was concerned or is concerned that that there's a lack of perhaps ideological direction in Black Lives Matter that would allow it to be to fizzle out, in, as he said, in comparison to Occupy Wall Street. As you are advanced in your own organization, as you all are headed to Cleveland to participate in this Black Lives Movement conference, how do you respond to that particular critique? Again, a loving critique from an elder of the struggle that some others share, that I've even shared as well, to be frank, is a concern about, in part because of the co-optation and the appropriation, that a more clear ideological structuring might be of some value here. But how do you respond to those kinds of, again, loving criticisms?
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
There it is. She is a trained Marxist.
This is the bearskin hoodie for
super versed in ideological theories. Here's a story from Mike Gonzalez from heritage.org. Actually, not so much a story as it is an editorial piece. There's Patrice again. You may not hear, and again, Black Lives Matter is pretty much the same thing as Every Child Matters in Canada. it's based upon the same principles in terms of their ideologies, right? Colonizers. You may not hear as much now about Black Lives Matter as you did in the fateful year 2020, but rest assured, it's still deeply affecting key aspects of our lives today. The divisive, critical race theory conflicts flaring across the country are a legacy of BLM. So is the crime wave that blights our cities, as are the race-conscious policies that Joe Biden is signing into law. Not bad for organizations founded by Marxists who set out explicitly to dismantle the foundations of American society. As he explains in his book, BLM, The Making of a New Marxist Revolution, Alicia Garza, one of the main BLM founders, made her goals clear in Maine in 2019 when she told a group of eager New England leftists, we're talking about changing how we've organized this country so that we actually can achieve the justice that we're fighting for. I believe we all have work to do to keep dismantling the organizing principle of this society, which creates inequities for everyone, even white people. Notice she didn't say inequalities. She said inequities, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which is all part of the critical race theory mantra, the ideology, which is Marxist. Ripping out the foundations of American society is exactly what these indoctrinating school children and putting American workers through re-education sessions or struggle sessions, as we saw a couple of weeks ago in that Alberta MLA's struggle session. School teachers now proudly and openly explain on social media they bring critical race theory to the classroom to challenge a broken system. Meanwhile, beleaguered employees are having to resort to lawsuits to stop their companies from trying to re-educate them through critical race theory. America proudly and rightly proclaims itself the land of the free. So how did we get here? Black Lives Matter brought us here. Every child matters brought us here. Critical race theory is the belief that America, Canada, pretty much any Western country, is systematically racist and oppressive, and has been so since its founding, and that all racial disparities are the result of that. The only way to solve those problems is through re-educating people into those beliefs and through category-based redistribution, which will require discriminating legally against whites and men. Not for nothing is Biden now signing into law bills that openly and explicitly discriminate against whites. We've seen that in Canada also. We're still seeing it in Canada. Critical race theory founders are Marxists, like Garza, who also question the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory. All right, let's take this off the screen for a second. You guys have heard me talk about Dr. James Lindsay before. Here he is discussing Marxism.
The question of the whole conference, which is a three meeting session that I was at the first one, was what is woke and what does it mean for Europe? And so I tried to give, in a sense, a genealogy of woke. And actually, a taxonomy is more accurate. I started off by saying, well, I think that woke is, in fact, Marxism that's evolved to attack the West. And the techniques it's using are reminiscent of Mao's Cultural Revolution. And so you can say that it's Marxist or Maoist. But then I said, we can't understand that unless we understand Marxism in a bigger way. If we focus on his economic analysis and capital, we miss the entire picture. If we take a step back and say that he outlined an entire theory of man and the world and our behavior in it and the meaning of life and purpose, telos for our being, which is to transform the world into the socialist utopia, to advance history to its intended end, then you can see that the particular mode of analysis becomes fungible. If it's economic analysis for Marx, then you get classical Marxism. If it's race analysis for the critical race theorists, it's almost, you have to massage around the edges, but it's almost the exact same architecture.
Well, that's certainly what it seemed to me to be. You know, one of the things that's been disturbing, I suppose, on the gaslighting front is whenever I draw a relationship between postmodernism and neo-Marxism, first of all, people say two things, that I don't know what I'm talking about, which, by the way, is rarely the case. And second, that that's a conspiratorial misreading of the relationship, that there's nothing that postmodernism has nothing to do with Marxism. And, I've taken that criticism seriously because it happens a lot. I think, well, is there some manner in which I have this wrong? And then I go back as much as I can to the source documents, including Foucault, and Derrida, and I think, well, they said they were Marxists. That seems like, proof. And the entire intellectual milieu at that time in France was Marxist, including people who should have known better, like Jean-Paul Sartre. So it's like that was the water in which those particular fish swam. And the postmodernists, when they themselves say that what would you say, that their intellectual effort is tending in the Marxist direction or is an extension of Marxism, I'm pretty much inclined to believe them. And so I don't understand how this notion that those two concepts are separate has come about. Do you have any idea about that?
I do. I've thought tremendously on this question, and I believe I have an answer. And kind of like yourself, if I open my mouth, usually I've thought about something before I spout off. And in this case, it's the nature of the way these theories evolve. They evolve through what technically is called dialectical critique. And so each descendant theory, say if we use Marxism as the common ancestor, if you will, and that's what I did, by the way, in the EU, as I said, think of Marxism as a genus, and then you have all these species. Well, postmodernism is a species, but they evolve through dialectical critique. So for each new derivative that comes out, say postmodernism, they have to create themselves by giving a critique of the thing that they were before. So they start by saying, here's where Marxism is wrong. And academics hyper-focus on these distinctions, and they say, look,
I see.
They
So
said,
that's what you think.
they say, just like you say, well, they say that they're Marxists, that looks like proof. They say, well, they said we're criticizing Marx, so that's proof that they're different. And the neo-Marxists are no exception, and you'll find literal
So you
Marxists
think it's
today.
narcissism of small differences, to
I
use
do.
the Freudian term.
I do.
Yeah, so there's a level of analysis at which I think your genus and species metaphor is a good one. So there's a level of analysis at which these are all variations on a theme, and there's another level of analysis where they're distinctly different, which is exactly what does happen in academic micro-arguments.
Right.
So you think part of that's, I think part of it's just the attempt to sow confusion as well.
Oh, probably,
and
yes.
And then also ignorance on the part of the critics, because they just don't know enough about what they're talking about to even know that there's a relationship between postmodernism and neo-Marxism and Marxism. I guess the other issue too is that in principle, the postmodernists were skeptical of meta-narratives. And it does seem not unreasonable to point out that Marxism is a grand meta-narrative.
Yeah.
And so if you're skeptical about meta-narratives, you might start out by being skeptical about Marxism. And if you just focused on the postmodern critique of meta-narrative, then you'd say, well, it couldn't be allied with Marxism because Marxism is a meta-narrative. But my response to that would be, what makes you think that incoherence ever bothered a postmodernist?
Right.
Right. In fact, they specialize in incoherence, and I think because it can sow discord and chaos most effectively.
This is why this metaphor, the genus species, is so important. And for me, this, Marxism is a grand meta-narrative, et cetera. This is almost like saying, imagine that the animal clade that we're talking about is something to do with cats, right? And so now we have cats, tigers. Well, tigers have a tail, right? And then lions have a tail, and house cats have a tail. So cats have tails, right? Well, not bobcats, not lynxes.
Right.
And so if we think of the tail as being a grand meta-narrative, in fact, the broad historicism of classical Marxism, you find both neo-Marxism or critical Marxism and postmodernism are becoming skeptical of this kind of grand trajectory of history narrative that was kind of the early modern thought. And as we shift from modern thinking to postmodern thinking, away from the scientific and into the kind of blatantly mystical and romantic, which the postmodernists are wholly characterized by, you can just imagine it. It's a cat without a tail.
Yeah.
I see, if we do this, I said Marxism is economic and critical race theory is race, and we can say that queer theory is the concept of who defines what's normal. Postmodernism is really a Marxist analysis of who gets to say what things mean.
Who gets to say what things mean? What is violence? What is a vaccine? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's about controlling the means of communication and information, my friends. So this is how it's evolved. And those guys going deep and discussing postmodernism and all that, ultimately the bottom line is cultural Marxism, is wokeism, is political correctness. So when was your first experience with political correctness? Go back. Go back. And I'm talking about a public situation. I'm not talking about insulting somebody and then feeling bad about it later at a dinner table or at a family gathering or something like that. I'm talking about in a public or better yet, when you first heard it, maybe on television, in a TV show or on radio. Go back right now. I just want you to, this is a thought experiment. Go back and think about when's the first time you heard something like this. For me, it was in the 80s. Now, this is going to be ambiguous, but in the 80s, I remember my program director at the radio station I was working at coming up to me and saying, be careful what you say on radio today, because there's this new organization called Media Watch listening to everything. And if they nail us, we're going to have to go in front of the CRTC and the CBSC and explain ourselves. And I went, like what? And he couldn't come up with an answer for me. So it just kind of worked out to, well, don't demean women. So why would I demean women? Well, don't even do it by accident. That's so all of a sudden now you're walking on eggshells and you really, really have to be careful what you're saying. That was like 1985 or 1986. And then a few years later, it was all about happy holidays. And this was at my son's elementary school during one of his Christmas concerts. They called it a holiday concert. I think when he was in 4th or 5th grade. So that would be sometime in 90, 91, in that area. So that would be my first real experience with it. And I remember, because I'm very outspoken, as you might be able to tell if you're a newcomer, if you're a regular viewer of this show, you guys know this, right? I walked in there and I went, happy holidays. What the hell is that? Merry Christmas, everybody. How you doing? But then it started to go around community clubs, all of a sudden it was happy holidays, best of the season, and Christmas was being left out because we were offending anybody who was not a Christian, apparently. And now it's gotten pretty bad to the point where, does Christmas today seem the same as it did even 5 or 6 years ago? Does it seem as celebrated? I'm not talking about your individual family and friends. I'm talking about ads that you may see on TV or malls when you go there. Does it seem as festive? To me, it doesn't. Now, maybe I'm hypersensitive to it and I'm seeing too much and maybe it's not real, but I get the feeling that they're trying to get rid of Christmas completely. It's not just you can't say Merry Christmas anymore. Now it's like, forget about Christmas. Christmas is gone. No more Christmas ever. Because they're trying to get rid of Christianity. They're still burning churches. I want to go to the comments here and I want to see what you guys are saying regarding your first experiences with political correctness or wokeism as it went on to evolve, which is now neo-Marxism. Anybody got anything in here? Tammy, I know you're late. What the hell? What's the matter? 20 push-ups. Much less commercialism, Lucette says. Okay. Well, then let's just move along here in our cultural Marxism discussion. Op-ed from TNC from Brock Eldon. Now, Brock is an associate editor of the C2C Journal, born and raised in Owen Sound, Ontario. Eldon earned his BA and MA in English language literature and from Western University and Queen's University, respectively. Inspired to write and to see the world, he began his time overseas teaching English and writing in East and Southeast Asia, beginning in South Korea, China, and Vietnam. With experience in more than 10 other countries, he settled in Hanoi, Vietnam, where in 2018 he earned a position teaching English for university and foundations in literature at RMIT University, which he held until early 2024. He's got a book out now. It's called Ground Zero in the Culture War. I'll be trying to get him on the show at his earliest convenience. He wrote this piece in TNC last year, almost exactly a year ago. I'm a trained Marxist, a woman with a PhD cohort ahead of me proclaimed with open pride at a department-wide event held for the Queen's University English Department when I was a graduate student there. We're all trained Marxists here. I saw, who was it, Catherine, watching tonight, ask about trained Marxists. Where do you think they come from? They come from universities, Catherine. They come from our public school system first, where they're kind of molded, and then completely and totally hardcore trained in the university system. Not a word was said, not an objection raised in response, but why should a student of literature be any kind of Marxist, much less a trained one? Shouldn't such a student still have an open mind? In my first column, Brock says, of this three-part series, I detailed my initial hopes for the future of the humanities when I entered university as an undergraduate. It's my intention here to shed light on what I consider the most concerning issue that faces my generation, a crisis whose birth I witnessed firsthand while pursuing my MA in English language and literature. This followed 2 years spent living either in extremely close proximity to or directly in the maws of literal communism regimes in East and Southeast Asia, North Korea, China, and Vietnam. This time abroad bestowed upon me this particular understanding to distinguish a totalitarian from a free society in which the individual would choose to dwell. What I then witnessed at Queen's was the full-scale breakdown of a Canadian university into an ideologically defective and indescribably dangerous place for a free thinker. This manifests and takes hold ideologically in the university classroom from the very outset, with the establishment of classroom and program expectations. As Brock detailed in his previous column, the students which employed with the tools to disgrace and defame the greatest writers in the history of English, from Chaucer to Shakespeare to T.S. Eliot, did not read, they raged. It didn't even matter if they had actually read or could write. Everyone got an A. What was the point when all one had to do to ensure a strong enough transcript for future applications to PhD programs was to accept and regurgitate the externally imposed beliefs? These are the classroom effects of radical leftism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, wokeism, call it what you will. But where does all of this come from? Our academics in fields including, though far from limited to, the humanities, are not engaged primarily in the deep and generative study of great books, people, and events in the human story. One must become an activist in order to become an academic in Canada. With the backing of the state and taxpayers' money, our universities have become weaponized propaganda wings. Inflated grades reward the brainwashed, filling seats and keeping students in line. This has been driven by postmodern neo-Marxism, which swaps the economics of Marx's dogma for identity categories, including race and gender. This came about through the emergence of news in the 1950s, 70s that the Soviet experiment had failed, following which self-proclaimed Marxist intellectuals, prominently including the Frenchman Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, looking to save face, applied the Marxist dialectic to a new target, humanities departments at universities across North America, Yale University, and others. Over time, and along with other drivers, the postmodernists turned academic research into a mechanism for the perpetuation of one objective: diversity, equity, and inclusion, or so-called anti-racism. Okay, that's enough of that. Now, let's see what some of the other, because I believe, and this is something I haven't heard anybody speak about yet, I believe that this is just a way station on the road to complete and total totalitarianism, right? Because imposing a law like Leah Gazan proposed on Friday would be incredibly difficult, wouldn't it? I mean, first of all, you have to convince police, you're going to go arrest that guy because he called you a name. And maybe it wasn't even a name. Maybe you just perceived it to be a name, which then you perceive to be violence. That's going to be tough. Even with the left-wing corporate media, how could they possibly, the left-wing corporate media, how could they possibly ever look at something like this and go, yeah, that's definitely democratic. Absolutely, it works. It's fair for everybody. How could they ever say that? And what do you think the percentage of Canadians opposed to something like this might be? People who still call you a conspiracy theorist for your beliefs in lockdowns, vaccines, and whatnot that happened during COVID might even be siding with us on this one, going, well, you know what, that's going too far. And I believe that's what's happening with people all across the West now. People are finally waking up, standing up and saying, well, that goes too far. But what happens when they bring in bio-digital convergence? What happens when digital ID and digital money come into play? And what about this? Because it's all about the climate, right? Oh, it's all about that climate emergency. Canada considering imposing climate fees on air travel. Now, if you complain, if you step up and complain, Leah Gazan's bill would call you a denialist. They're saying, hey, wait a minute, there's no climate emergency. And even now, as I say those words, I'll bet the algorithms on YouTube are looking to shut me down, or at least post up a warning beneath the screen. Something about climate change. Is not weather, it is the circumstances of decades-long study, blah, 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 blah. Just by saying what I just said in the last 10 seconds, that's cultural Marxism is what that is, controlling the message. That's what all this censorship has been. Now, the Canadian government is considering slapping air travelers with a climate surcharge, a recent federal poll suggests. Environment and Climate Change Canada used to be just the Environment Department. Now it's Environment and Climate Change, headed by Stephen Guilbeault. The Trudeau administration's Environmental Department commissioned an internal survey to gauge whether Canadians who book flights would be willing to pay extra money for climate change. When asked if they would pay an additional fee so airlines can purchase sustainable aviation fuel, 63% of respondents said they were opposed to the idea, thank God. When asked if they would pay an additional fee so airlines can purchase carbon emissions offsets, 65% said no, sorry. By the way, what exactly are these carbon emissions offsets? Well, we're going to take the money, the extra money that you have to pay us. We're going to go plant trees with that. So it'll offset the carbon footprint of this flight. That's my understanding of what these offsets are, which is completely preposterous. The poll also asked residents if they would pay a surcharge up to $50 on flights costing $500 or more. Only 30% said they would support the measure, according to a report from Rebel News. So it looks like, at least at this stage of the game, and I do believe all this climate alarmism is now on the downslope. At least I'm hoping that's the vibe I'm getting. So it looks like that may be down the toilet for all of the progressives. But what about the digital currency? Even though the Bank of Canada said just last week, hey, look, we're scrapping this idea. We've been doing surveys and nobody's in favor of anything to do with digital currency, the CBDC thing. No, central bank digital currencies, programmable digital currencies, I don't think so, because basically then what you're dealing with as a consumer is a digital coupon that they can turn on or off depending on your behavior. Climate behavior, maybe it's your behavior in the street. Maybe you jaywalked and one of the cameras caught it, like in China, and your social credit score goes from 950 to 925. And then you do something else like insult somebody in the street, cameras pick it up. That's another 25 points. You go below 750 and now all of a sudden your internet slows down. Go below 400 or 500 and you move from a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom. That's how that works over there. And if we continue just going, then that's what's going to happen here as well. Not just here, but in the United States. That's why the election down there is so bloody important. So beware of the government's push for a digital currency. Government wants your money. It will beg, steal, borrow if necessary, but it wants your money any way it can get it. The government schemes to swindle, cheat, scam, and generally defraud taxpayers of their hard-earned dollars have run the gamut from wasteful pork barrel legislation, cronyism, and graft to asset forfeiture, costly stimulus packages, and a national security complex that continues to undermine our freedoms while failing to make us any safer. Americans have also been made to pay through the nose for the government's endless wars, subsidization of foreign nations, military empire, welfare state, roads to nowhere. bloated workforce, secret agencies, fusion centers, private prisons, biometric databases, invasive technologies, arsenals of weapons, and every other budgetary line item that's contributing to the fast-growing wealth of the corporate elite at the expense of those who are barely making ends meet. That's us, taxpayers. This is what comes from 1.2 trillion spending bills. Someone's got to foot the bill. Because the government's voracious appetite for money, power, and control has grown out of control. Now, this guy says government. I think it's a couple of layers above the government, but we all know that already. Their agents have devised other means of funding their excesses and adding to their largesse through taxes disguised as fines, taxes disguised as fees, taxes disguised as tolls, tickets, and penalties. No matter how much money the government pulls in, it's never enough. So the government has to keep introducing new plans to empower its agents to seize Americans' bank accounts, make way for the digital dollar. Whether it's the central bank digital currency favored by Biden or the cryptocurrency being hawked by President Trump, the end result will still be a form of digital money that makes it easier to track, control, and punish the citizenry. For instance, weeks before the Biden administration made headlines with its support for a government-issued digital currency, the FBI and the Justice Department quietly moved ahead with plans for a cryptocurrency enforcement team, a virtual asset exploitation unit tasked with investigating crypto crimes and seizing virtual assets, and a crypto czar to oversee it all. No surprises, of course. This is how the government operates, by giving us tools to make our lives easier, while in the process making it easier for the government to crack down. Indeed, this shift to a digital currency is a global trend. More than 100 other countries are considering introducing their own digital currencies. Trump, too. Trump is big into crypto. He's big into Bitcoin. Here is Ezra Levant guesting on the Alex Jones show on InfoWars.
But let me tell you what's going on in Canada, because I can report with firsthand observation. Justin Trudeau, he's very unpopular right now, and he has it in his mind that he can fix that by censoring things. He's brought in 4 different censorship laws. C11, which is law, gives him dominion over the internet.
And he ordered this years ago.
Yeah, and he has the power to order companies like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube to boost or deboost the algorithm to hide or promote media of his choice.
So that's a government censor bureau.
Yeah, that's C11. C18 was he basically said to Facebook and Google, anytime you link to a Canadian news story, you got to pay them. You got to pay to link to someone. Facebook said, no thanks, we get out of the news business. Google is forking over $100 million a year. That gets parceled out to approved journalists. I'll tell you about that in about 30 seconds. There's a bill in Parliament right now called C63, includes a life in prison sentence for standalone hate crimes, includes you can be liable for anything on your social media going back to as far as in time. There's no statute of limitations. As long as you have the power to delete it today, you're on the hook. So they can complain not just for what you're doing now, they can work their way back through your historical oeuvre, your portfolio of issues, and file a complaint. And every complaint that you get hit with is a $20,000 bounty to the complainant. So what they're doing is they're opening up something called the Canadian Human Rights Commission. If there's anything in social media you don't like, you can complain about it to this Human Rights Commission.
Malice.
You don't even have to be the victim of the slur. If you get the complaint adjudicated in your favor, you get a 20 grand bounty, and the person has to pay up to 50 grand to the government. So he's basically—
While they're incentivizing going and being someone that complains. Wow.
And here's the last. So I mentioned C11. That's where they alter the algorithm to boost or throttle their friends and enemies. I mentioned C18, where they grab cash from the tech giants to pay off their friends. I mentioned C63, which has this bounty on hurt words. But the last one is something that we're facing right now. Trudeau has created a news license, a journalism license. He calls it the QCJO, Qualified Canadian Journalism Organization. And the government determines whether or not you get that. Now, if you don't get that, you're still allowed to publish a website, but it's a credential you're denied, so you can't go to government press conferences. They won't let us in. You don't get any of the dough that's being handed out. $30,000 per journalist is the average subsidy in Canada. Now, we wouldn't take that, but that's another thing we're being denied. But here's what terrifies me. If you're not a QCJO news licensed news outfit, and you would never be, and we're not, well, guess what Trudeau can say to the tech companies? He would never say ban InfoWars. He would never say ban Rebel News. He would just say, hey, big tech companies, boost the quality journalism and throttle the fake news. And I didn't mention the word Rebel News, and I didn't mention the word InfoWars, but the QCJO news license can tell you who's on which side.
And let's be clear, Google's been involved here, and with the EU, they're setting up similar systems. Google wants this.
For some reason, I don't know why they like paying $100 million a year for Canadian journalists. Maybe because it sort of makes them regulation proof.
Well, they're because they're about management of information. They're part of the deep state,
and this gets them off the hook because Trudeau is the guy who gets to determine who is and isn't a fake news, and then the Google and the tech companies just implemented it.
So how do we get rid of Trudeau? Because I mean, he only got like what 20% of the vote or something.
Yeah, and right now in the polls, he's so far behind.
Well, explain to people that don't live in a parliamentary system how that happens.
Well, we don't.
Okay, well, we're not going to. Okay, we all know the parliamentary system, but I will say this to you guys: that in the latest polls, it shows Justin Trudeau, well, the Liberal Party at 22%, and the NDP at 20%, and the Conservative Party at 43%. If you take Quebec out of the mix, then the Liberal Party falls to third place behind the NDP. Their seat projection in this next election, whenever it happens to be, it could be this year, it might be next spring, or it could be when the fixed election date law is in effect next October. Their projected seat projection is anywhere between 30 and 50 at this stage of the game. They will be reduced to a rump party. Elon Musk posted this, speaking of elections, posted this on X just today. Very few Americans realize that if Trump is not elected, now again, we know that he is backing Donald Trump, this will be the last election. Far from being a threat to democracy, he is the only way to save it. Let me explain. Even if 1 in 20 illegals become citizens per year, something the Democrats are expediting as fast as humanly possible, that would be about 2 million new legal voters in 4 years. The voting margin in the swing states is often less than 20,000 votes. That means if the Democratic Party succeeds, there will be no more swing states. Moreover, the Biden-Harris administration has been flying asylum seekers who are fast-tracked to citizenship directly into swing states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Arizona. It's a surefire way to win every election. America then becomes a one-party state and democracy is over. The only elections will be the Democratic Party primaries. This already happened in California many years ago following the 1986 amnesty. The only thing holding California back from extreme socialism and suffocating government policies is that people can leave California and still remain in America. Once the whole country is controlled by one party, there will be no escape. Everywhere in America will be like the nightmare that is downtown San Francisco. Here's one of our favorite European politicians, Christine Anderson.
Build a global network. It's not just happening in Germany or Italy or Spain or UK or Canada or the United States or Australia. It is happening in every single Western democracy, since they are all in lockstep about abolishing freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, and making you nothing but underlings and peasants. So it's up to us, the people. We need to fight this together, and that's why we need to build a global network, because we are so much more. And we are even way more than the ridiculous puppets. They call themselves like prime ministers and presidents, stuff like that. They're puppets. So we are in this together. We need to stick together, and we need to fight them.
Okay, so how do we do this? I'm going to get to that in just a second. I looked up a list of the worst dictators of the 20th century by death. And I found the top 2 were Marxists. Adolf Hitler is not one of the top two, by the way. Joseph Stalin accounted for 23 million deaths because of the Great Purges and Ukraine's famine as part of the Marxist ideology. Number one, Mao Zedong. Between 49 and 78 million deaths. Policy reforms like the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. The Great Leap Forward was basically anybody who clung to the old ways was persecuted and killed. Cultural Revolution is what we're facing right now. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I would like you guys to reply in comments if you will. And that is, how are we going to fight this thing? What are we going to do? Are we going to just kind of go with the flow and hope it just all goes away one day? Or do we fight back? Do we stand up and say, well, that's enough of that? And it may go against the programming that you, me too, have been exposed to over the past 30 or 40 years from the Canadian left-wing corporate media. If you speak out about all of the illegal immigrants that have come across our border in the past few years, these asylum seekers, as they're called, if you speak out, do you feel inside that you're being racist, or you don't want to speak out publicly about it because you fear that somebody else will call you racist? I used to. I'm going back a few years here, but I used to feel those things. I don't anymore. And it's not because I hate people. I don't. But, the more and more people I speak with, and I'm not talking about here on the show, I'm talking about just in general, in person, people who are immigrants, who got here the right way, legally. They did the paperwork, they waited their turn, they did it right. They do not like what's going on right now. And the same thing goes for the United States. You see that all the time in articles and news stories. So we have to get past this we have to shake it off. We have to shake off this whole Canadiana thing. Canadians are nice. We never say anything bad. We don't talk badly about people. We always say, I'm sorry. All of that nonsense. If we actually want to save Canada, then we have to start standing up and pushing back. And if that means being called a bigot or a racist or a homophobe or a climate denier or whatever that happens to be, then we have to take that chance. Now, I understand there can be some fallout from doing something like that. If you go on your social media and you say, listen, any of the things I just talked about, your employer might come to you and say, hey, easy with those political views on social media there, bub. To which you say, this has nothing to do with you. This is my own personal Facebook page. I don't include my workplace anywhere on it. And to be safe, to insulate yourself, perhaps you should say views are my own on whatever social media you're talking about, X, Instagram, Facebook, they're all the same. Just put it out there and say, hey, these are my views. They don't reflect anybody else's or anything else's but mine. This is what I think. So are you afraid of being called names? Or are you afraid of being attacked by the other side? Because if you are, we haven't got a chance. What I ask you guys, I look at you guys as leaders, each and every one of you in your own community, right? You're the ones who are going to be getting this out to people. When I ask you to like and share, I'm not kidding. I want you to get this information out to as many people as we possibly can. Because the more people who listen to this stuff, the better off we're going to be. And it might take them a few days, a few weeks, a few months to absorb all of this information, and then maybe they'll finally stand up and do something about it. But if you guys are the beginning, if you guys don't share this stuff, if you guys don't get this out there, then all hope is lost. It's that important that we get this information out. Because if we let this cultural Marxism go any further, they will criminalize free speech. they will become a like what you've seen what's happened in the UK, where you put a meme on social media, cops are knocking on your door. They'll take you away. And you know, the thing about that is they only have to do it a couple of times. They need to set an example. So, oh, look, let's get this guy. And then the news, the left-wing corporate media just covers it left. Looks Bob Berry from Nipigon is arrested by police for posting a racist meme on Facebook. And everybody sees that. Everybody's chilled. And that's what that is supposed to do. It's supposed to create a chilling effect on people all across the country, a fear effect on people all across the country, so you don't dare do it yourself, lest you be visited by the thug police and hauled away to jail for posting a meme. Or your thoughts. If we let this go any further, we're screwed. Pierre Poilievre may or may not be a part of it, you guys. I'm not going to sit here and say one way or the other, but I do get a kick out of the PPCs who come to me and say, Maxime Bernier is the only way. Hey, look, Maxime Bernier went to Davos for the World Economic Forum. Pierre Poilievre never did. Maxime Bernier was in the cabinet as a senior minister of Stephen Harper. Pierre Poilievre was a junior minister. Maxime Bernier has been a career politician just like Pierre Poilievre. So if you're going to sit there and tell me the PPC is any better than Pierre Poilievre, I'm sorry. But that's just not how it is. So you can vote PPC all you like. They've got 2% of the vote right now. They're not going to get a seat. It doesn't matter. If you want to make sure that the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens are destroyed in the next election, the only way to do that is to vote for the Conservative Party of Canada. And hopefully Pierre Poilievre not only sticks to his word and does the things he's going to say he's going to do, but also goes further and gets rid of all of the things that he sees are Marxist policies. Because remember, he does believe that Trudeau and his father before him were Marxists. I have more in the all access tonight on shadowdavis.com, you guys. The extension coming up in just a couple of minutes. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight on the show. I love you all and I appreciate you all. And I will catch you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream. And for you all access members, the extension begins in 2 minutes on shadowdavis.com. I'll see you soon. For the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow night. Bye for now.